The envelope was on the kitchen counter when I got home, still in my graduation gown, still holding the roll diploma I had worked 8 years to earn. My cap was in my other hand, and I remember thinking how strange it was that someone had left an envelope on the counter instead of just telling me whatever it was face to face. He was sitting at the kitchen table. He didn't stand up when I came in. He didn't say congratulations. He just looked at the envelope and then looked at me, and I understood before I even touched it. I set the diploma down, I picked up the envelope, I opened it, and I read every page before I said a single word. Stay with me. Because this is the story of a woman who gave everything she had to someone who was already calculating the exit, and what she had been quietly building for years while he was busy planning his. My name for this story is Lena. I was 36 years old the day I graduated. I had been with my husband, I'll call him Carter, for 11 years. Married for 9. We had met in our mid-20s, both of us with ambitions and no money, and the kind of energy that makes young people believe everything is still possible. Carter had a dream. He wanted to open his own architecture firm. It was a real dream. He was genuinely talented, genuinely passionate, and genuinely convinced that if he could just get the right foundation under him, he could build something extraordinary. I believed him. That is important for you to understand. I did not stay out of obligation or fear or lack of options. I stayed because I believed in him. Completely. So when he said he needed time to build the firm before it could support both of us, I said yes. When he said the early years would be lean, and I would need to carry more of the financial weight, I said yes. When he said he needed to take a particular high-profile project that would require 18-hour days and full weekends for months, I said yes. Yes, yes, yes. I worked a full-time job in hospital administration. I covered our mortgage. I covered our health insurance. I covered groceries and utilities and the car payments and these unexpected costs that come with owning a house. The furnace that broke in February, the roof that needed patching after a storm, the water heater that gave out on a Sunday morning with no warning. I did this for 8 years. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, I made a decision that I kept mostly to myself. I enrolled in a part-time degree program, nursing. I had always wanted it and kept setting it aside. For Carter, for the mortgage, for the firm, for the endless series of urgent things that were always more important than what I wanted. I decided, very quietly, that I was going to finish it. Whatever it took, I told Carter. He says it was great. He said he was proud of me. He kissed me on the forehead and went back to his blueprints. That was the last time he asked about it. Over the next 4 years, I took classes on weekday evenings after 8-hour shifts. I studied during lunch breaks. I sat in hospital cafeterias with my textbooks open while Carter attended firm dinners and industry events I could not afford to miss work for. I submitted assignments at midnight on weekdays and studied through Saturday mornings while he slept in. No one made me do this. That is not the point. The point is that he knew. He knew what I was doing, what it was costing me, what I had already given and was continuing to give. He knew. And he said nothing, not a question, not an offer to help. Not a single adjustment to his own schedule to make space for mine. I want to tell you about my 34th birthday because I think about it often. It was a Tuesday. I had a clinical rotation that ran until 7 in the evening and a midterm paper due at midnight. I had been awake since 5:30. I came home to an empty house. Carter was at a client dinner I had known about for 2 weeks. On the kitchen counter was a bakery box with a single cupcake inside and a sticky note that said, "Didn't forget. Celebrate this weekend." We did not celebrate that weekend. Something came up with the firm. I ate the cupcake standing at the counter in my scrubs. I opened my laptop and I finished the paper. I submitted it at 11:58. And then I sat there in the dark kitchen for a while, not crying, not angry, just very, very clear. Something had shifted that night. Not broken, I wasn't ready to call it that. But a door had opened somewhere in the back of my mind, and I had looked through it, just briefly, and seen something I could not unsee. I closed the laptop. I went to bed. I did not mention the birthday when Carter came home the following evening. But I started paying attention differently after that. Year 6 of the firm, things started to shift in other ways too. Carter landed a major commercial contract. Then another. The firm wasn't just surviving, it was growing. He hired 2 junior architects. He started talking about a second office. He went to a conference in another city and came back with a different energy that I noticed but could not name. He started referring to the firm as his, not ours, his, a small word. An easy thing to explain away. I explained it away 11 times before I stopped explaining it. I told myself it was the success talking. I told myself this was what we had both been working toward, and I should feel proud instead of hollow. I chose to believe that for a year and a half longer than I should have. Now, I want to stop the story here for just a moment, because I think some of you already know what I am describing. Not the specific details, but the feeling. The moment when something that was once warmth becomes routine. When the person who used to ask how your day went stops asking. When you realize you cannot remember the last time your name was in a sentence that wasn't about logistics. If that feeling is familiar to you, stay with me, because what comes next is for you. The night before my graduation, Carter said he had a conflict and wouldn't be able to attend the ceremony. A site meeting he couldn't reschedule. He said he was sorry. He said we'd celebrate after. He hugged me. I remember the hug felt practiced. I drove to my graduation alone. I sat in a row of strangers. When my name was called, I walked across that stage and I shook the dean's hand and I took my diploma and I thought about the furnace and the roof and the water heater and the Tuesday birthday and the cupcake on the counter and the midnight assignments and the cafeteria tables and the 8 years of yes, yes, yes. I thought, I did this. Whatever else is true, I did this. I drove home in my gown. And I found the envelope. I want to be honest with you about what it feels like to read divorce papers while still wearing your graduation regalia. It is not a dramatic moment the way you might imagine. It is very quiet. Your hands are very steady. The words are clear and precise, and there is something almost merciful about legal language. It leaves no room for interpretation, no space for hope to hide in. He cited irreconcilable differences. He had already spoken to a lawyer. The filing date, I noted, was 3 weeks prior. He had filed while I was studying for my final practicum. While I was in a hospital, learning how to help people through the hardest moments of their lives, he was in a lawyer's office planning how to exit mine. I put the papers back in the envelope. I looked at him across the kitchen. I said, I need a few days. He looked surprised. I think he expected tears. I think he expected a scene, something he could point to later as proof of a difficult temperament, a justification he could carry into the next chapter of his life. I did not give him that. I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of the bed in my graduation gown. I thought about the cupcake, about the sticky note, about 11 years of building something for someone who had decided, at some point that I will never know exactly, that I was part of the foundation and not the future. And then I picked up my phone and I made a call. Her name for this story is Dr. Patrice. She was a labor and delivery nurse I had done my practicum rotation with, and she was also, quietly, the single most practical person I had ever met in my life. I had told her about my situation in general terms over the months we worked together. She had listened without drama and said very little. But she had given me the name of a family law attorney 6 months earlier, casually, the way you pass someone an umbrella when the sky looks uncertain. I had made an appointment with that attorney 5 months ago. I want to be clear, I did not know this was coming. I had not been certain. But I had been paying attention since that Tuesday birthday. And something in me, some careful, quiet part that had been watching the energy shift, and the questions stop and the absence become structural rather than circumstantial, had decided to be prepared, because that is what 8 years in hospital administration teaches you. Not to expect the worst, but to have a plan for it. The attorney's name for this story is Miss Holt. She was direct and unhurried, and she had spent the last 5 months helping me understand exactly what I was entitled to. And what I was entitled to was significant. 9 years of marriage, 8 years of documented financial contribution. I had kept records, meticulous ones, because I am by nature an organized person, and hospital administration teaches you that documentation is not optional. Mortgage payments, insurance premiums, utilities, the furnace, the roof, the water heater. 8 years of receipts and bank statements and a very clear picture of exactly whose income had built the foundation that Carter's firm had been constructed on. There was also the question of the firm itself. In the early years before the firm had revenue, Carter had needed capital. We had taken out a home equity line of credit. I had co-signed. The firm's initial operating costs, the lease, the equipment, the software licenses, the first hire, had been partially funded through that line. My income had serviced that debt for 3 years before the firm could sustain itself. Miss Holt explained that this created a financial entanglement, that Carter's attorney was going to have a very difficult time arguing away. Carter had filed thinking this would be simple. He had a successful firm, his own accounts, his own professional reputation. He had assumed, and I think this assumption was genuine, which is perhaps the saddest part of everything, that I would accept whatever he offered because I had always accepted whatever was necessary. Because I had been saying yes for 8 years, and he had stopped noticing that yes was a choice. He had confused my generosity with passivity. He had mistaken patience for the absence of a plan. 3 days after I found the envelope, I sent him a letter through Miss Holt's office. It outlined very specifically what I was going to request. It included 12 pages of financial documentation. It referenced the home equity line. It referenced the co-signature. It referenced 8 years of contribution, itemized, with dates. I am told his attorney called Miss Holt that same afternoon. The negotiation took 4 months. I won't walk you through every step. What I will tell you is that Carter had structured his filing around one core assumption, that I would take the house and some spousal support and consider that fair, given that the firm was his. What he had not accounted for was that I did not want the house. I wanted a percentage of the firm, not a controlling interest, not management involvement, a financial stake, a recognition in legal and monetary terms that the firm had been built in part on my labor, my income, my credit, and my sustained absence from my own ambitions for the better part of a decade. In month 3, Carter called me directly. I had not spoken to him since the night I found the envelope. I stood in the parking lot of the hospital in my scrubs, and I listened to his voice, and he said, and I want to be precise here because the exact words matter, he said. Lena, I never meant for this to become a war. I thought about a Tuesday birthday, a bakery box, a sticky note, a celebration that never came. I thought about sitting in a row of strangers at my own graduation. I thought about 11 years. And I said very calmly, it isn't a war, Carter. It's an accounting. Then I gave him Miss Holt's number, and I went back inside. The settlement was finalized on a Thursday morning. I was at work when Miss Holt called. I stepped into a supply closet between rounds and listened. I received a lump sum payment. I received a structured arrangement that would pay out over 3 years, tied directly to the firm's revenue, which meant the more successful his firm became, the more I would receive. I received a clean title to a small investment property we had purchased together 4 years earlier that Carter had, apparently, forgotten to factor into his initial filing. I said thank you to Miss Holt. I went back to my rounds. I finished my shift. I drove home to the apartment I had rented 3 months earlier. A small place, 2 bedrooms, with a window in the kitchen that faces east and fills with morning light in a way I find, every single day, quietly extraordinary. Carter's firm is still operating. I hear this occasionally through people we both used to know. I do not follow his progress. I do not wish him harm. He made a decision and I adapted to it, the way I have always adapted. Quietly, methodically, without wasting energy on a bit that would cost me more than it ever cost him. I am a registered nurse now. I work in labor and delivery, which is where Dr. Patrice works, which is not a coincidence. I see beginnings every single shift. A career built around beginnings suits me very well. The investment property has appreciated considerably. On the 1st of every month, a deposit arrives in my account. In 14 months, by my calculation, my student loans will be gone entirely. I still have the diploma. It's in my bedroom, in a simple frame, on the wall where I can see it from the bed. Not because I need the reminder, because I earned it on the hardest day of my life, and I see no reason to put it away. Someone asked me once whether I regretted the 8 years, whether I would go back and choose differently. I thought about it for a long time before I answered. What I said was this. I learned what I was capable of during those 8 years. Not just what I could endure, what I could build quietly and steadily when no one was watching. I learned that I could carry more than I thought I could. I learned that patience is not the same as powerlessness. And I learned that documentation, kept carefully and without drama, can tell a story that no argument can dismantle. I would not choose differently. I would choose myself sooner. That is the only change I would make. If you are in a season where you are giving more than you are receiving, where your name is not on the success story, but your hands are in it, where you have eaten a birthday cupcake alone in the dark, because the person who was supposed to celebrate you had somewhere else to be. I want you to hear this. Keep your records. Know your worth with the specificity of someone who will one day be asked to prove it. Build something for yourself, even quietly, even slowly, even in the margins of everything else you are carrying, because the diploma does not care what else was happening the day you earned it. And the person who underestimated you will one day stand in a lawyer's office, reading 12 pages of evidence that you were paying attention the entire time. You were never invisible. You were building. If this story found you at the right moment, if something here felt true in a way you weren't expecting, please subscribe. There are more stories like this one. Stories about the people who were told to wait, who were handed the foundation role and never the headline, who were patient so long that everyone mistook it for acceptance. They were not accepting. They were preparing. New story every week. I'll see you in the next one.